Why does the strongest sorcerer alive choose to blind himself? Not metaphorically, literally. In a world where vision equals power, where perception decides life or death, Satoru Gojo willingly covers his eyes every single day. And no, it's not just a fashion choice. It's not about mystery. And it's definitely not because he's trying to look cool. Gojo covers his eyes because seeing too much is dangerous. Not just for his enemies, but for himself. And once you understand the real reason, Gojo's entire character changes. At first glance, Gojo's blindfold and sunglasses seem like classic anime flair. A visual shorthand for "this guy is different." But in Jujutsu Kaisen, nothing that deliberate is accidental. Especially not something worn by the most powerful being in the series. By the end of this video, you'll understand what Gojo's eyes truly do, why keeping them uncovered is a constant burden, how this choice reflects his philosophy as a sorcerer, and why his blindness might be the most human thing about him. Let's start with the obvious truth that everyone knows, but few truly understand. Gojo's eyes aren't normal eyes. They are the six eyes, a hereditary ocular jujutsu ability passed down through the Gojo clan. But calling them good eyesight is like calling a supernova a bright light. It's technically true, but it misses the point entirely. The six eyes grant Gojo an almost divine level of perception. He doesn't just see curses, he sees cursed energy at an atomic level. He can distinguish its flow, density, efficiency, and intent with terrifying accuracy. Where most sorcerers feel cursed energy like heat or pressure, Gojo sees it like raw data, constantly updating in real time. This is why Gojo can manipulate the Limitless technique with such perfection. The six eyes reduce cursed energy consumption to nearly zero. Every action he takes is optimized. Every calculation is instant. Infinity, blue, red, hollow, purple, all of it works because his eyes process information faster than any human mind should. But here's the part people overlook. The six eyes never turn off. From the moment Gojo was born, the world has been screaming information at him non-stop. Every curse, every sorcerer, every residual trace of energy leaves a visual imprint that his brain is forced to process. Imagine trying to sleep while reading millions of lines of code projected onto the inside of your eyelids. Imagine never being able to unfocus. That's Gojo's reality. This is why, even as a child, Gojo was exhausted. In the hidden inventory arc, we see a younger Gojo without his blindfold. He wears sunglasses instead, and even then, he complains about fatigue. This is before he fully mastered his techniques, before infinity became automatic, before he was untouchable. That exhaustion wasn't physical, it was sensory overload. The blindfold isn't there to hide his power from others. It's there to protect Gojo from his own perception. By covering his eyes, Gojo limits the amount of visual cursed energy data entering his brain. It's like lowering the resolution on a screen that's too sharp to look at. He can still fight. He can still sense everything he needs to. But the constant, overwhelming flood is reduced to something manageable. This also explains why Gojo only removes his blindfold when things get serious. When he fights special-grade curses. When he enters a domain battle. When precision matters more than comfort. Uncovering his eyes isn't a power-up. It's Gojo choosing pain for efficiency. And that choice tells us a lot about who he is. Gojo isn't reckless with his power. He's calculated. Despite his cocky attitude, he understands his limits better than anyone. Covering his eyes is an act of discipline. A constant reminder that even the strongest sorcerer must manage his own humanity. There's also a symbolic layer here that Jujutsu Kaisen loves to explore. Gojo sees everything, yet he chooses not to. In a series obsessed with perception, truth, and curses born from human emotion, Gojo's blindness is self-imposed restraint. He could see the entire Jujutsu world for what it truly is at all times, the corruption, the fear, the endless cycle of death. But he doesn't. Because seeing everything doesn't mean you can change everything. This is where Gojo differs from characters like Sukuna or Kenjaku. They pursue absolute understanding and control, regardless of the cost. Gojo, on the other hand, limits himself intentionally. Not because he's weak, but because he knows unchecked perception leads to detachment. And detachment leads to monsters. Now, quick spoiler warning for manga readers only. This will be brief and meaningful. In later arcs, when Gojo is sealed, the absence of his presence shakes the entire balance of the world. But what's fascinating is that even then, the Six Eyes remain a threat. Not because of raw power, but because of what they represent. The Six Eyes are fate-bound to Tengen and the Star Plasma Vessel. Historically, they appear when the world needs balance. Gojo isn't just a strong sorcerer, he's a corrective force. But here's the twist. Even fate needs restraint. Gojo covering his eyes is him rejecting the idea that power alone should dictate the future. He doesn't want to be a god watching ants. He wants students. Equals. A generation that doesn't need him. That's why he teaches. That's why he jokes. That's why he deliberately acts unserious. The blindfold is part of that act. A barrier between him and godhood. There's also a practical combat reason most people miss. By limiting visual input, Gojo sharpens his other senses. He relies heavily on cursed energy perception rather than traditional sight. This makes him harder to deceive. Illusions, visual misdirection, and even certain domain effects are less effective against him because he doesn't depend on his eyes the way others do. In other words, Gojo fights blind so that when he truly sees, nothing can hide. Now let's talk theories. One popular fan theory suggests that Gojo's blindfold acts as a binding vow-like limiter. Not officially stated, but consistent with Jujutsu Kaisen's power system. By restricting his senses daily, Gojo may subconsciously increase his efficiency and control when he removes the blindfold. This wouldn't be a formal binding vow, but a habitual self-nerf that keeps his abilities sharp and prevents complacency. It's the same principle as training under weighted clothing. When the restraint comes off, everything feels lighter. Another theory connects the blindfold to Gojo's emotional isolation. Despite being surrounded by people, Gojo is fundamentally alone. No one else can see the world the way he does. Covering his eyes is a way to close the distance, to exist closer to everyone else's reality. Notice how Gojo often removes his blindfold in moments of absolute resolve. Not rage, not panic, clarity. When Gojo reveals his eyes, it's not about intimidation. It's about acceptance. He's choosing to fully engage with the world as it truly is, consequences included. And that's what makes him terrifying. Not his strength, not infinity, not hollow purple, but the fact that he holds back every single day. Looking toward the future, Gojo's relationship with perception may be the key to how his legacy survives, regardless of his presence. His students aren't taught to see more, they're taught to understand more. Yuji learns empathy before technique. Megumi learns choice before power. Yuta learns restraint before domination. All lessons Gojo learned by covering his own eyes. If the Six Eyes represent absolute awareness, then the blindfold represents wisdom, the understanding that knowing everything doesn't mean acting on everything. And that might be the most important theme in Jujutsu Kaisen. So the next time you see Gojo adjusting his blindfold, remember this. He's not hiding his power, he's containing it. Because the strongest sorcerer isn't the one who sees everything. It's the one who knows when not to look.